The silence in my new penthouse didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like victory. Standing 30 floors above Crestfall Harbor, I finally owned something that had no strings attached, no family debts, and no hidden clauses, or so I thought. I didn't realize then that to my parents, my success wasn't an achievement to be celebrated. It was a resource to be harvested, and they had already packed my sister's bags before the ink on the deed was even dry. The heavy brass key felt colder than I expected against my palm. It was a tangible, biting cold that reminded me this was real. I stood in the center of the living room on the 30th floor of Glasslight Tower, watching the sunlight fracture against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of Crestfall Harbor was expansive, a sweep of steel-gray water and modern architecture that looked exactly like the life I had spent 15 years trying to build. I had signed my name 34 times that morning. My hand had cramped by the final signature, but the ache was satisfying. It was the ache of ownership. For a 33-year-old single woman who had built a career in brand strategy from the ground up. This penthouse was not just real estate, it was a fortress. But as I looked out at the city, a familiar, tightening sensation gripped my chest. It was the phantom limb of my family dynamic. In the Ross family, success was never a personal triumph, it was a community resource. When I got my first promotion at 24, my father asked if I could co-sign a car lease for my younger sister, Brenna. When I landed the director role at Kestrel Creative, my mother suggested I start paying the property taxes on their house to help them out. They were like water seeking the lowest point, always flowing toward wherever the money was pooling. And now, I was standing in the deepest pool I had ever created. I had not told them about the penthouse, not yet. I turned away from the window and walked to the kitchen island, running my hand along the cool quartz. Tonight was for me. Just tonight. I needed to imprint my own energy onto this space before the inevitable invasion attempted to breach the perimeter. The housewarming was small, deliberate, and perfect. I had invited only 4 people. Talia, my best friend since college, who was currently sprawled on my new velvet sectional with a glass of champagne. Marcus, my mentor and the CEO of Kestrel Company, and 2 other close colleagues who knew the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into the down payment. Marcus raised his glass. He was a man of few words, silver-haired and sharp as a tack. "To Hazel," he said, his voice rumbling with genuine warmth. "The only person I know who can negotiate a hostile takeover of a failing brand before breakfast and close on a luxury penthouse by lunch. You earned this. Hazel, every square inch." I clinked my glass against his. "Thank you, Marcus." "It feels surreal." Talia sat up, kicking off her heels. She looked around the room, her eyes wide. "It is not surreal." She corrected me. "It is math. You worked 80-hour weeks for a decade. This is just the equation balancing out. But seriously, Hazel, the security in this building is intense. The concierge made me show ID and then called up to confirm I was actually expected. It is like Fort Knox." I smiled, taking a sip of the crisp wine. "That is the point." I said, "I want to feel safe. I want to know that when I close that door, the world stays out." Talia gave me a look that said she knew exactly who I was trying to keep out. "Have you told them?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," I said. "I wanted one night. Just one night where this place is mine. If I tell my mother, she will be asking about the guest room square footage within 10 seconds. Marcus chuckled darkly. "Ah, the Ross family collective," he said. "Well, enjoy the silence while it lasts. Hazel." We spent the rest of the night laughing, eating expensive takeout from the sushi place downstairs, and watching the city lights flicker on. It was the kind of peace I had starved for. There was no guilt, no subtle digs about my selfishness, no requests for loans masked as emergencies. When the last of them left around midnight, I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I checked the digital lock panel. Green light. Secure. I went to sleep in the middle of my king-sized bed, limbs sprawled out, claiming the space. The peace lasted exactly 8 hours. My phone rang at 8 in the morning. I was in the kitchen, making pour-over coffee, wearing a silk robe I had bought specifically for this new life. I looked at the screen. Mom, my stomach did a slow, heavy roll. I had not posted anything on social media. I had not sent a text. But somehow, the radar was pinging. I picked up, putting on my professional voice, the one I used for difficult clients. "Good morning," I said. "Hazel." Her voice was high, breathless, and laced with a sugar that made my teeth ache. "Oh, honey, we heard the news. Aunt Linda saw the public deed transfer listing online. She tracks the family names. You know how she is. Glasslight Tower." "Oh my God. Hazel. That is the most expensive building in the city." The air left the room. Aunt Linda. Of course. The family gossip network was faster than fiber optic internet. I took a sip of coffee. Black and bitter. "Yes, Mom," I said. "I closed yesterday. I was going to call you guys this weekend once I got settled." "Settled? You did not tell us you were even looking." Her tone shifted instantly. The sugar dissolved, revealing the hard, granular calculation underneath. "How big is it?" "Linda said it looks like a 3-bedroom unit from the price." "Is it a 3-bedroom?" "It is a 2-bedroom with a den," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "2 bedrooms," she repeated. "And a den. That is plenty of space. Plenty." "Does it have a guest suite? With its own bathroom?" I closed my eyes. "It has a 2nd bedroom." "Yes. And what are the fees?" "The carrying costs must be astronomical." "Hazel, are you sure you can handle that alone?" "You know, your father and I always worry about you taking on too much. It is a lot of pressure for one person." "I am 33. Mom, I am a partner at the firm. I can handle the fees." Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. The gears turning. Calculating the volume of the container I had just bought so she could figure out how much of her own baggage she could pour into it. "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, conspiratorial whisper, "we are just so proud. We really are. We need to come see it. Soon. Your sister has been having such a hard time lately. Hazel, seeing your success. I think it would be good for her, to see what is possible." I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom, I am not even unpacked. I am living out of boxes. Let me get my bearings first." "We will not be in the way," she insisted. "We just want to celebrate you. Do not be so cold." "Hazel, it is unbecoming. I have to go." "Mom," I said, cutting the line before she could pivot to the ask, "I have a meeting." I hung up. The silence in the penthouse had changed. It was no longer empty. It was waiting. I went into the office 2 hours later. Kestrel Compto. Creative occupied the top 2 floors of a renovated warehouse in the arts district. It was a space of exposed brick, glass walls, and high-tension creativity. I loved it here. The rules were clear. You performed, you got paid. I was in the middle of reviewing a strategy deck for a new tech client when the receptionist, Chloe, messaged me, "Your sister is here. She says it is urgent. She is crying." I stared at the screen. Brenna, here? She had never come to my office. She found corporate environments stifling and toxic to her aura. Brenna considered herself a free spirit, which mostly meant she was expensive to maintain. "Send her to the small conference room." I typed back, "Give me 5 minutes." I walked into the conference room 5 minutes later to find Brenna pacing. She looked wrecked. Her usually perfect blonde waves were matted. Her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing a coat that looked like she had slept in it. "Brenna?" I asked, closing the glass door behind me and pulling the blinds. She spun around and threw herself at me. It wasn't a hug. It was a collision. She smelled like stale perfume and panic. "Hazel, you have to help me." She sobbed into my blazer. "It is over. It is all over." I peeled her off me and guided her to a chair. "What is over?" "Sit down. Breathe." She collapsed into the chair, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Todd," she choked out. "He kicked me out. He said he could not do it anymore. He changed the locks." "Hazel, my stuff is in garbage bags on the curb. I have nowhere to go. I cannot go back to Mom and Dad's house. I cannot hear Dad's lecture about how I chose the wrong guy again. I just cannot take it. I looked at her. My younger sister, 29 years old. But she still looked 19 in moments like this. There was always a crisis, a bad boyfriend, a mean landlord, a car that mysteriously broke down. I am sorry. Brenna, I said, keeping my distance. That sounds terrible. I just need a place for a little while, she said, looking up at me with wet, pleading eyes. Just until I get on my feet. I heard about the penthouse. Mom told me. She said you have a guest suite. The speed of it was breathtaking. Mom called it 8. Brenna was here by 10. It was a pincer maneuver. Brenna, I just moved in yesterday, I said gently. I do not have furniture in the second room. It is barely a home yet. I do not care about furniture. She grabbed my hand. I will sleep on the floor. I just need to be safe. Hazel, please, I am scared. I do not have any money for a hotel. Todd froze the joint account. Something in her eyes flickered. It was fear. Genuine fear. But there was something else. Evasiveness. She wasn't looking at me directly. She was looking at my chin, my shoulder, the wall behind me. Why did he kick you out? I asked. He is crazy, she shouted, her voice cracking. He just snapped, said I was spending too much. It is not true. He is just controlling. I sighed. I knew I should say no. Every logical circuit in my brain was screaming no. But the responsible spare programming ran deep. If I said no, she would sleep in her car. Mom would call me screaming that I was heartless. I would be the villain in a story I didn't even write. 2 weeks. I said. Brenna froze. What? You can stay for 2 weeks, I said, my voice hardening. But there are rules, strict rules. This is not a sorority house. Brenna, this is my home and my sanctuary. She nodded rapidly. Anything. I promise. I walked over to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. Not to write on the board, but to give my hands something to do. Rule 1. No keys. You get a fob for the elevator and the front door, but you do not get a hard key to my unit. I will let you in and out, or you use the keypad code which I will change when you leave. Rule 2. No visitors. Period. Not Todd, not friends, not Mom and Dad. Rule 3. You are out in 14 days. We will write down the date. She looked a little hurt by the list, but she swallowed it. Okay, she said. I understand. Thank you. Hazel, you are saving my life. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I didn't want to save her life. I just wanted to live mine. Come on, I said, checking my watch. I will take an early lunch. Let's get your bags. The drive to the penthouse was quiet. Brenna had 3 large suitcases. It looked like she had packed in a hurry, zippers straining against the fabric. When we pulled up to Glasslight Tower, her demeanor changed. The tears dried up. As the valet opened her door, she straightened her coat. She looked up at the glass facade, shielding her eyes from the sun. Wow, she whispered. I watched her. It didn't look like awe. It looked like appraisal. We went through the lobby. The concierge, a young man named David, smiled at me. Welcome back, Ms. Ross. David, this is my sister, Brenna. I said, she is staying with me for a few days, 2 weeks maximum. Please issue her a temporary guest pass for the elevator. Brenna leaned on the high marble desk, flashing a smile at David that was a little too bright for someone who had just been evicted by a crazy boyfriend. Hi, David, she said. Is there someone at the desk 24/7? Yes, ma'am, David replied politely. 24 hours a day. And the cameras? Brenna asked, gesturing to the discreet dome in the corner. Do those cover the whole lobby? Or are there blind spots? David blinked, confused. They cover everything, ma'am, for your safety. Good, Brenna said. That is good. I ushered her toward the elevators. Why are you asking about the cameras? I asked as the doors slid shut, enclosing us in the silent, mirrored box. I told you, she said, her voice dropping. Todd is crazy. I just want to make sure he cannot get in. It was a plausible answer, but as we rose steadily toward the 30th floor, I watched her reflection in the brass paneling. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the panel of buttons, reading the floor numbers. She looked at the emergency call button. She looked at the service hatch in the ceiling. She was mapping it. When we got into the apartment, the behavior continued. She didn't comment on the view or the high ceilings. She walked straight to the panel by the door that controlled the smart home features. "Is this connected to the police?" she asked, tapping the screen. "It is a monitored alarm." "Yes," I said. "Does it have a panic mode?" "Brenna," I said sharply, "if you are in that much danger, we need to go to the police station, not a penthouse. Did he threaten you?" She flinched, pulling her hand away from the panel. No, not like that. I am just anxious. I am sorry." She took her bags into the guest room. I stood in the hallway, listening to the zip and unzip of luggage. I felt like I had just led a Trojan horse through the gates, and I was the one who had opened the door. Later that evening, I went down to the mailroom to check my box. I needed a break from Brenna's nervous energy. The mailroom in Glasslight Tower was luxe, with walnut paneling and soft jazz playing. I was fumbling with my small mailbox key when a woman next to me spoke up. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and wearing a cashmere shawl that probably cost more than my first car. "You must be Hazel," she said. I turned. "Yes." "Hi, I am Maris Holt," she said, extending a hand. "I am in 30B, right across the hall." "Oh, nice to meet you," I said, shaking her hand. It was cool and dry. "I just moved in." "I know," she said. Her eyes were dark and intelligent. They drilled into me. "You know, it is funny. The concierge mentioned you moved in yesterday, but I feel like I have been hearing your name for a week." I frowned. "I am sorry." Maris lowered her voice, leaning in slightly. "Last Tuesday," she said. "Before the closing, I was in the lobby. A man came in, asked for the buzzer code for Hazel Ross in 30A. The concierge told him the unit was empty, but the man insisted. He knew your name. He knew the unit number." A chill went down my spine. Last Tuesday, I hadn't even signed the final bank papers. "What did he look like?" I asked. "Average," Maris said. "Trench coat, hat, but aggressive. He did not look like a friend. I just thought you should know." People usually do not know who lives in the penthouse unless you tell them. Thank you. "Maris, that is unsettling." She gave me a tight smile. "Be careful. Hazel, walls here are thick, but secrets have a way of leaking out." I went back up to the 30th floor with my heart hammering against my ribs. The elevator ride felt too long. When I got to my door, I saw it. A white envelope. Plain. Standard size. It had been slid halfway under my door. It wasn't there when I left 10 minutes ago. I stared at it. Brenna was inside. Had she put it there? No, that made no sense. Had someone come up while I was downstairs? You needed a key fob to get to this floor. I crouched down and pulled the envelope out. It was sealed. There was no name on the front. I tore it open right there in the hallway. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was jagged, pressed hard into the paper. As if the writer was angry. Family should live together again. "Don't make this difficult." There was no signature. I stood up, clutching the paper. Family should live together again. It sounded like my mother. It sounded like my father. But the handwriting, I didn't recognize it. It was too messy to be my mother's careful cursive, too legible to be my father's scrawl. I looked at my door. Behind it, Brenna was unpacking. I unlocked the door and walked in. Brenna was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. She jumped when I entered. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "You were gone a while." I looked at her, really looked at her. Was she in on it? Or was she the bait? I folded the note and shoved it into my pocket. "Just meeting the neighbors," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The lights were twinkling, beautiful and distant, but the reflection in the glass showed the room behind me, my sanctuary. It didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a trap. And I had just locked myself inside with the first piece of bait. I took a deep breath. If they wanted to play games, they had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the little girl who sought their approval anymore. I was the woman who closed deals. And I was going to find out who slid that note under my door. Even if I had to tear this building apart brick by brick. Don't make this difficult, the note said. Too late. I intended to make it impossible. The morning sun hitting the glass walls of my penthouse should have felt like a baptism, washing away the grit of the previous night. Instead, it felt like an interrogation lamp. I was awake long before the light hit the floorboards, sitting at my kitchen island with the anonymous note smoothing out under my palm. Family should live together again. I had read those 5 words 100 times since finding the envelope. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive, nothing like my mother's looping script or my father's block capitals. But the sentiment? The sentiment was pure Ross family doctrine. I folded the note and slid it into the inside pocket of my blazer. I needed answers, and I needed them to be invisible. I took the elevator down to the lobby at 7 o'clock. The morning concierge, a different man from the night before, looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Ms. Ross. Good morning," I said, leaning casually against the high marble counter. I had a quick question about the building protocols. I am reviewing my security setup. Is there a way to get a log of everyone who has queried my unit number in the last week? Not just visitors, but inquiries. He hesitated, tapping his keyboard. We do maintain a digital log of all intercom activity and front desk requests, Ms. Ross. However, we usually only release that to the police or for insurance claims. I leaned in closer, dropping my voice. I am not asking for a formal release. I just want to know if the system flags repeated inquiries from non-residents. I have had some aggressive marketing mail. I want to make sure my information is secure. He softened. The damsel in distress with a privacy concern angle usually worked. Even if I was the furthest thing from a damsel, I can check the flags for you, he said. He typed for a moment, his brow furrowing. That is odd, he murmured. What? You have had 3 inquiries at the desk in the last 4 days. 2 in person, 1 over the phone, none left a name. And he squinted at the screen. There was an attempt to access your floor via the service elevator keycard reader yesterday afternoon. It was denied. Obviously, only staff cards work there. My blood ran cold. Yesterday afternoon, while I was at work, before Brenna arrived. Thank you, I said, keeping my face smooth. Can we upgrade my unit's security? I want the silent notification mode on. If anyone rings my bell or tries a code, I want a push notification to my phone immediately, and no unannounced guests, even if they claim to be family. Done, he said. I walked back to the elevator, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Someone was testing the perimeter. When I got back upstairs, Brenna was awake. She was sitting on the sofa wrapped in a duvet, looking small and fragile. She offered me a weak smile. Morning, she said. I slept so well. It is so quiet up here. Morning, I replied, forcing a lightness I did not feel. I am glad. I have to head to the office for a few hours, but I will be back by early afternoon. She nodded, pulling the duvet tighter. Hazel? She asked. Thanks. For this. I looked at her, searching for the deception, but all I saw was my little sister, messy-haired and bruised by life. Guilt pricked at me. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the note was a prank from a jealous neighbor. Maybe the service elevator attempt was just a delivery driver at the wrong building. No problem, I said. I worked through the morning at Kestrel Como, burying myself in spreadsheets and brand positioning statements. Work was safe. Work was logic. Input equaled output. At 2 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was the building app. Visitor alert. Front desk. Mr. and Mrs. Ross. I stared at the screen. I had not given them the address. I had not invited them. I had explicitly told my mother I needed time to settle. My phone rang seconds later. Hazel. It was my father. His voice boomed, filling the quiet of my office even without the speakerphone on. We are downstairs. The guy at the desk is giving us a hard time. Tell him to let us up. We have surprises. I closed my eyes, inhaling a long, steady breath. They were here. The invasion had formally begun. I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. Wait in the lobby. We can just go up and wait in the apartment. Hazel, Brenna is there, right? No, I said sharply. The concierge will not let you up without me. It is building policy. Wait in the lobby. I hung up before he could argue. I grabbed my bag and marched out of the office, telling my assistant to clear my afternoon. When I walked into the lobby of Glasslight Tower 20 minutes later, the scene was almost comical. My parents were sitting on the velvet banquettes like they were holding court. My mother was wearing her church and brunch floral dress, and my father was in a polo shirt that was tucked in too tightly. Between them sat a stack of boxes and bags. Hazel! My mother cried out, standing up and opening her arms. There she is! The homeowner! She hugged me, enveloping me in the scent of lavender and passive aggression. Mom, Dad, I said, stepping back. I thought we discussed waiting until the weekend. Oh, nonsense, my father said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. You cannot buy a penthouse and expect us to stay away. We are excited. Look at this place. Marble everywhere. Must cost a fortune in maintenance fees. He looked around the lobby, assessing the value, calculating the wealth. Let's go up, my mother said, grabbing a shopping bag. I brought a few things. The ride up in the elevator was suffocating. My father watched the floor numbers tick up, whistling low through his teeth. 30 floors, he muttered. That is a long walk down if the power goes out. Hope you have emergency supplies. We have a generator. Dad, when we entered the apartment, the dynamic shifted instantly. It was no longer my space. My mother walked in and immediately began rearranging. She moved a vase on the console table. She adjusted the blinds. She touched the quartz countertop like she was checking for dust. It is modern, she said, the word sounding like an insult. Very cold. You need some warmth in here. Hazel, that is why we brought this, my father said, tearing the paper off a large, flat rectangle. He held it up. It was a framed photograph, a massive one. It was a studio portrait of the four of us from 5 years ago. I was wearing a suit, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Brenna was in the center, glowing, wearing a soft pink dress, with my parents leaning in toward her. I stood slightly to the side, like a bodyguard or a distant relative. It is for the entryway, my mother declared. So everyone knows who you are. I looked at the photo. It was a shrine to their dynamic, the golden child and the responsible spare. I will find a place for it, I said. Not moving to take it, Brenna came out of the guest room then, dressed in jeans and a sweater, looking significantly more put together than this morning. Mom! Dad! She squealed, hugging them. They embraced her like she was a war hero returning home, not a woman who had been evicted 24 hours ago. Now, my father said, reaching into his pocket. We have one more practical thing. Since Brenna is staying here, and we are going to be popping in to help you get settled, we need to sort out the access. He pulled out a keychain. It had a cheap plastic tag on it that he had written Hazel's place on in Sharpie. I need you to get a set cut for this, he said, holding out the empty ring. And a fob. The guy downstairs said he could not give us one without your authorization. The air in the room stopped moving. This was it, the test. I looked at the keychain. If I gave them a key, I would never be alone again. They would come in while I was at work. They would reorganize my drawers. They would surprise me with dinner. They would own me. I cannot do that. Dad, I said. My father's smile faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. His eyes went flat, hard, and cold. It was a look I knew well. It was the look he gave waiters who got his order wrong. Excuse me? He said, his voice dropping an octave. Building policy? I lied, smoothly. Calmly, they are incredibly strict. Only residents on the lease get keys and fobs. Even Brenna only has a temporary guest pass that expires in 2 weeks. They monitor the key usage digitally. If I give out a spare, I get fined and flagged. My father stared at me. He knew I was lying. I knew he knew, but he couldn't prove it without asking the concierge, and his pride wouldn't let him do that in front of me. He laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Safety first, right?" he said, shoving the keychain back into his pocket. "You and your rules. Hazel, always so by the book. Fine. We will just call ahead. Just call ahead," Brenna echoed. She was watching us, her eyes darting back and forth like a spectator at a tennis match. "Why don't I make some tea?" Brenna suggested, her voice too bright. "The kitchen is amazing. The stove is induction." She ushered our parents into the living room, breaking the tension. I stayed in the entryway for a moment, my hand trembling slightly. I had held the line, but I had seen the anger in my father's face. He wasn't used to being told no. The afternoon wore on. My mother criticized my furniture choices. Gray is so depressing. While my father tapped on the walls, checking for studs. Around 5 o'clock, I went into my bedroom to answer a work email. I left the door cracked open. The voices from the living room drifted down the hallway. I heard the sliding glass door to the balcony open. I sent the email and stood up to join them, but something stopped me. A whisper. It was coming from the balcony. The wind was carrying the sound in through the crack in the sliding door, and because of the acoustics of the hallway, it funneled right to my bedroom door. "She is resisting," Brenna's voice said. It was low, urgent. "I told you she would. She is watching everything." I froze. Who was she talking to? My parents were in the living room. I could hear my father coughing. Pause. "No, I haven't found the file yet. She locks the office door. I need more time." My stomach dropped. The file. What file? I heard the sliding door open wider, and I quickly stepped back into my room, picking up a stack of papers to look busy. Brenna walked past my door a moment later. She saw me and jumped. "Oh," she said. "I was just getting some fresh air." "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "No one," she said quickly. "Just leaving a voicemail for a friend." She hurried back to the living room. I stood there, my mind racing. She wasn't just mapping the exits. She was looking for something. Dinner was ordered in, Thai food, eaten around my dining table. The mood had shifted. My parents were no longer critical. They were solicitous, helpful. It was the phase of the cycle I hated the most, the setup. "Hazel, honey," my mother said, spooning curry onto her plate. "We have been talking." "About this situation." "What situation?" I asked, keeping my fork moving. "You, living here alone in this giant place, and Brenna, with her situation. It seems silly for her to rush out in 2 weeks. Here it comes. I have a timeline. Mom, Brenna knows that." "Yes, but listen." My mother pressed on. "We have a proposal, a family plan. Brenna stays here. She can help you. She can manage the cleaning, the groceries, run errands for you. You are so busy with your career. You need a wife, essentially." She laughed at her own joke. "And we will pitch in," my father added. "We will come by on weekends, handle repairs, make sure the place is kept up. You pay the mortgage. We handle the life part. You can finally stop being alone. Hazel, we can be a unit again." The way they said it, "stop being alone," wasn't a promise of companionship. It was a threat. It implied that my solitude was a defect, a failure that they were graciously offering to fix. I put my fork down. The metal clattered against the china. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice steady. "But no, I bought this place to live on my own. I have a cleaner. I have a grocery delivery service. I do not need a property manager. And Brenna needs to stand on her own feet, not be my housekeeper." My mother's face crumpled. "You are so selfish," she whispered. "We are trying to help you. You are trying to move in." "Mom," I stood up. "I'm going for a walk. I need some air." I grabbed my coat and walked out before they could see the tears of frustration pricking my eyes. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs down 3 flights before catching the elevator, just in case they were watching the display. I didn't go for a walk. I went to a wine bar 3 blocks away and called Lena Park. Lena was an old law school friend of Talia's. She specialized in estate law and family disputes. She met me 20 minutes later, looking sharp in a navy suit, ordering a sparkling water. I told her everything: the note, the key refusal, the overhear on the balcony, the family plan. Lena listened, her face unreadable. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Hazel, this isn't just overbearing parenting," she said. "This is a coordinated occupancy attempt. They are trying to establish tenancy." "Tenancy?" I asked. "If Brenna stays there for 30 days, or if she receives mail there, or if she provides services in exchange for housing like cleaning." "She becomes a tenant. You would have to formally evict her. It could take months. And your parents? If they get a key, they have access." She pulled a notepad out of her bag. "You need to document everything," she said. "Every conversation, every request. Keep the text messages. And you need to verify your financial perimeter immediately. If they are this aggressive about the apartment, they might be aggressive about other assets." My phone buzzed on the table between us. It was a notification from my credit monitoring app. "Alert. New inquiry blocked." I picked it up. My hands were cold. "What is it?" Lena asked. I unlocked the phone. Someone tried to open a line of credit in my name. I said, reading the screen, "A $70,000 personal loan." "Who?" I tapped the details. It was blocked because the address did not match my current file. I said, "They used an address. 412 Oak Street." Lena frowned. "What is 412 Oak Street?" "It is my aunt's house," I whispered. "We lived there for 6 months when I was 10. While my parents were renovating, no one uses that address for me. It is not on any public record. Only my parents would remember that." Lena's eyes hardened. "They are trying to leverage your credit." "Hazel, they think because you have the penthouse, you have infinite liquidity." I stood up. "I have to go back." "Do not escalate," Lena warned. "Do not scream. If you scream, they will call you unstable. They will gaslight you. Be a rock. Be boring. And get Brenna out." I walked back to the penthouse. The wind off the harbor was biting, but I barely felt it. The rage inside me was a hot, dense coal. $70,000. They were trying to pawn my future before I had even unpacked my past. When I entered the apartment, it was quiet. The TV was on low. My parents were sitting on the sofa, drinking my wine. Brenna was painting her nails at the coffee table. "Where did you go?" my mother asked, her tone icy. "It is rude to leave guests." I walked to the center of the room. I didn't sit down. I got an alert on my phone. I said. My father looked up from his glass. "What kind of alert?" "A credit alert. Someone tried to take out a $70,000 loan in my name about an hour ago, using Aunt Linda's old address on Oak Street." The silence that followed was heavy, thick. My mother took a sip of wine. "Well, identity theft happens all the time. Hazel, you probably shopped on a bad website." "It wasn't a website, Mom. The address used is 20 years old. Only family knows that address." My father stood up. His face was red. "Are you accusing us?" he demanded. "Is that what this is? We come here to celebrate you, to help you. And you accuse your own parents of fraud?" "I am not accusing," I said. Channeling Lena's voice, "I am stating facts. The bank blocked it. I have flagged the attempt as criminal fraud. The police will investigate the IP address of the applicant." Brenna stopped painting her nails. Her hand froze in midair. "The police?" she squeaked. "If it was a hacker, you have nothing to worry about," I said, looking directly at my father. "But if it was someone who knows me, they should be very worried." My mother stood up next to my father. They presented a united front, a wall of indignation. "You have always been like this," she spat. "Paranoid. You always think you are smarter than everyone else. You think because you have money now, you are better than us. You think we are out to get you." "I do not think I am better," I said. "I think I am targeted." "We are leaving," my father announced. He grabbed his jacket. "Come on, Martha. We do not have to stay here and be insulted by our ungrateful daughter. They didn't look at Brenna. They didn't offer to take her with them." "Brenna, are you coming?" I asked. She looked at our parents. My father gave her a barely perceptible shake of his head. I will stay, she stammered. I cannot go back to Todd's. My parents stormed out. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the second lock. I turned to Brenna. She was staring at the nail polish bottle. I am going to bed, she said quietly. I am sorry, they yelled. She hurried into the guest room and shut the door. I didn't go to bed. I waited 10 minutes. Until I heard the shower turn on in the guest bathroom, I walked softly down the hall and opened the guest bedroom door. The room was steamy from the adjacent bathroom. Her suitcase was on the bed. It was empty. I opened the dresser drawers. They were full, neatly folded stacks of jeans, sweaters, t-shirts. Her toiletries were arranged on the vanity, underneath a stack of sweaters in the bottom drawer. I found something else, a stack of mail, my mail, redirected. There were letters from my bank, my insurance company, and a letter from the building HOA. She, or they, had intercepted my mail before I even got it. I picked up the HOA letter. It was opened. I looked at the drawers again. This wasn't a 2-week stay. She had unpacked everything. She had moved in, and judging by the intercepted mail, she wasn't just a guest. She was a spy. I closed the drawer quietly. Don't make this difficult, the note had said. I went back to my room and pushed a heavy chair in front of my door. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop. I pulled up the draft of a document Lena had sent me. Notice to vacate. I typed in Brenna's name. If they wanted a war, they had one. But they were fighting on my terrain now, and in this penthouse. I controlled the vertical. The lock on the guest suite closet was not a standard installation. I hired a contractor from 3 towns over, a man who did not know my name or my family, to install a biometric handle that required my fingerprint to open. I did this at 9 a.m, 2 hours after I had left for work, returning briefly while Brenna was still asleep. It was a silent boundary, a physical manifestation of the wall I was building brick by brick. When I left the apartment again, I went straight to the bank. The safety deposit box cost me $100 a year, a trivial price for peace of mind. Into the cold metal drawer went my birth certificate, my passport, the deed to the penthouse, and the hard drive containing the backup of my entire digital life. I felt a strange sense of mourning as I slid the box into its slot. A woman of 33 should not have to hide her identity from her parents. She should be sharing it, but I was not a daughter anymore. I was a host organism fighting off a parasite. By noon, I had reset every password I owned: email, banking, investment accounts, even my social media. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything, routing the codes to an authenticator app rather than my phone number. Just in case they tried to clone my SIM card. It felt paranoid. It felt excessive. But the image of my sister's suitcase, unpacked into drawers that were not hers, burned in my mind. When I returned home that evening, the air in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. Brenna was sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the city lights. She did not turn when I entered. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. "Hey," I said. She stayed silent for a long moment before turning her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but the expression on her face was not sadness. It was resentment. "I tried to put my coat in the hall closet," she said. Her voice was flat. "It is locked." I took a sip of water, letting the cool liquid settle my stomach. "Yes," I said. "I moved some personal files in there. It is for security." "Security?" she repeated. "From whom? From me?" I set the glass down. "From everyone. Brenna, I told you, I had a security breach. Someone tried to open a loan in my name. I am locking down everything until I figure out who it is." She stood up, the blanket falling to the floor. "You think it is me?" she accused. "You think I am the one doing it. That is why you are treating me like a prisoner. First the rules, now the locks. It is humiliating. Hazel, I am your sister, not a thief." I watched her carefully. She was deflecting. It was a classic Ross tactic. When cornered with logic, explode with emotion. I never said you were a thief, I replied calmly. I said I am securing my home. If you are not doing anything wrong, the locks should not bother you. She let out a sharp, frustrated noise and stormed past me toward the guest room. You make it impossible to relax here, she shouted over her shoulder. You walk around like you are the Queen of Sheba, and I am just some dirt on your shoe. Brenna, I called out. She stopped at the door, her hand on the frame. What exactly is the plan? I asked. You have been here 3 days. Have you looked for an apartment? Have you called a lawyer about your breakup? Her shoulders stiffened. I am working on it, she screamed. Stop pressuring me. You have no idea what I'm going through. She slammed the door. I heard the lock click, the flimsy privacy lock that came with the handle, not the steel deadbolt I had installed on my own door. I stood in the silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. She was not working on it. She was digging in. The next morning, my father called. I let it go to voicemail initially, but he called back immediately. Twice. On the third ring, I answered, putting the phone on speaker as I reviewed a contract at my desk. Hazel. He boomed. No hello? I am working. Dad. What is it? He cleared his throat. The sound was heavy, preparatory. Your mother and I have been talking. We are worried about you. And Brenna. We hate to see you girls fighting. Brenna called us last night in tears. She says you are making her feel very unwelcome. I stopped typing. She is welcome for 2 weeks. Dad, that was the agreement. Yes, the 2 weeks, he said dismissively. But let's be realistic. She cannot get back on her feet in 2 weeks. The market is terrible, and she is fragile right now. I waited. I knew the pivot was coming. So, here is what we are thinking, he continued. We know that building of yours is expensive. The homeowners association fees alone must be what, $2,000 a month? $2,400? I corrected automatically. Exactly. That is a lot of money. Hazel, even for you. So, your mother and I want to help. We are willing to cover the association fees for you. For a while. Maybe 6 months. Or a year. I frowned. My parents were notoriously tight with money. They never paid for anything without a reason. Why would you do that? I asked. To help, he said, forcing a jovial tone. Families help each other. We pay the fees. Take that burden off your shoulders. And in exchange, you let Brenna stay, indefinitely, just until she is ready to move on. No pressure, no deadlines. She stays as long as she needs. The equation clicked into place. They were trying to buy a room in my house for $2,400 a month, but it was not just a room, it was a foothold. If they paid a bill, they would feel entitled to the asset. They would say, we pay for the maintenance, so we have a say in who visits. We have a say in the decor. Money was not a gift in my family. It was a leash. I do not need help with the fees. Dad, I said, I budgeted for them when I bought the place. Don't be proud. Hazel, everyone needs help. It is not pride. It is math. I can afford my home. And Brenna cannot live here indefinitely. That is not healthy for her or for me. His tone hardened instantly. You are turning down free money just to spite your sister? I am turning down a transaction I did not ask for. Brenna leaves in 11 days. Dad, I hung up before he could guilt-trip me further. My hand was shaking. They were escalating. They were throwing cash at the problem, which meant the problem was expensive. Why was it so vital that Brenna stay in the penthouse? Why not a hotel? Why not their house? I needed to know what Brenna was running from. I spent my lunch hour ignoring my actual work and diving into the digital footprint of my sister. Brenna had always been vague about her career. She called herself a curator or a lifestyle creative. I started with the name of the LLC she had mentioned once at Christmas, Sun Petal Studio. A simple search brought up a sleek, pastel-colored website that was currently displaying a site under maintenance banner. But the internet never forgets. I used a cache retrieval tool to look at the site from 2 months ago. It was a lifestyle brand selling high-end wellness products, silk yoga mats, crystal water bottles, organic skincare. The prices were exorbitant. A yoga mat for $300. I dug deeper. I looked up the business registration. Sun Petal Studio was registered in Brenna's name, but the registered agent address was a PAO box in the financial district. Then I searched for legal filings. My screen filled with red flags. Sun Petal Studio had 3 pending lawsuits for breach of contract, suppliers who had not been paid. But the most alarming entry was a Uniform Commercial Code filing from 6 months ago. Debtor: Sun Petal Studio / Brenna Ross. Secured party: Westmere Funding Group. Collateral: all assets, present and future, including personal guarantees. I searched for Westmere Funding Group. They were not a bank. They were a merchant cash advance company, the kind that offered quick, high-interest capital to desperate businesses. The reviews were a horror show. Stories of frozen bank accounts, harassment, and aggressive collections. I looked at the amount listed in a judgment filing from 2 weeks ago, $150,000. I sat back in my chair, the air hissing out of my lungs. It wasn't just a breakup with Todd. Todd had probably found out about the debt, or maybe the debt collectors had started calling Todd. Brenna owed a predatory lender $150,000, and she had signed a personal guarantee. That meant they could come after her personal assets. But Brenna had no assets, except, perhaps, access to a sister with a multi-million-dollar penthouse. The threat moved from digital to physical later that afternoon. I was in a strategy meeting when my phone buzzed with a priority alert from the building concierge. I signaled for a pause and stepped out. "Yes?" I answered. "Ms. Ross, this is David at the front desk. I have a gentleman here asking for your sister." I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. "Who is it? Does he have a name?" "He refused to give a name," David said, his voice lowered. "He said he is an associate of hers. He is persistent. He tried to walk past the desk to the elevators. I had security step in. Do not let him up," I said firmly. "Under no circumstances. I am not letting him up. Ms. Ross." But he left a message. He said, and I am quoting here, "Tell her the clock is done ticking." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "Thank you. David, call the police if he returns. I am coming home." I left the office immediately. The drive to Glasslight Tower was a blur of red lights and honking horns. The phrase echoed in my head. The clock is done ticking. This was not just debt. This was danger. When I got to the penthouse, I found Brenna in the living room. She was watching a reality show, eating popcorn, looking for all the world like a teenager on summer break. "Turn it off," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. She looked up, startled by my tone. "What?" "I'm just watching." "Turn it off." She clicked the remote, the screen going black. "What is your problem?" she snapped. I walked over to her. Standing between her and the window, a man was in the lobby today. "Brenna. He asked for you. He refused to give his name, and he left a message." Her face went pale. The popcorn bowl rattled in her lap. "What message?" she whispered. "He said the clock is done ticking." Brenna squeezed her eyes shut. A tear leaked out, tracking through her foundation. She began to shake. I sat down on the coffee table, facing her. "Westmere Funding Group," I said. Her eyes snapped open. The terror in them was absolute. "How do you know that name?" "I did my research. You owe them $150,000. You signed a personal guarantee." She dropped the bowl. Popcorn scattered across the expensive rug I had just bought, but I didn't care. "It is not my fault," she cried, her voice rising to a hysteria. "It was the inventory. The supplier in Bali took the money and never shipped the silk. I had to take the loan to cover the pre-order refunds, or they were going to charge me with fraud. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time." "You do not have time, Brenna. You have sharks in the lobby." She grabbed my hands. Her palms were clammy. "You have to help me, Hazel. Please. They call me 10 times a day. They called Todd's work. That is why he kicked me out. They said they would seize his car because I used his address on an application once. They are going to ruin me." "Why are you here?" I asked, pulling my hands away. "Why did Mom and Dad push you here?" "Because they promised," she sobbed. "Promised what?" "They said if I laid low for a bit, if I got inside here, That you would help. They said you have the money now. They said you are the rich one, the stable one. They said if I just got my foot in the door, they would handle the rest. They told me to come here. The room seemed to tilt. They told you to come here, I repeated slowly. So I would pay off your debt? Yes. No, I mean... Brenna wiped her nose. Frantic. They said they would negotiate with you, that we could work something out, maybe a loan against the Penthouse, just to clear the Westmere balance. Mom said you would never do it if I just asked, but if I was family, if I was living here, you would have to protect me. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the street 30 floors below. The cars looked like toys. My parents had not sent Brenna here to heal. They had sent her here to hide, and they had painted a target on my front door. They had weaponized my home to clean up their mess. They were willing to risk my safety, my credit, and my peace to save Brenna from the consequences of her own delusion. And the worst part was, they had probably convinced themselves they were doing me a favor, giving Hazel a chance to be the hero. I turned back to Brenna. Did you give them my information? I asked. For the loan application yesterday? The one on Oak Street? She looked down at her lap. Mom asked for your social security number a long time ago, she whispered. For the insurance policy. She kept it, she said. She said it was just to buy time. To show Westmere we had access to capital, so they would stop sending people to the house. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. This was criminal. This was conspiracy. I am going to my room. I said, Hazel, please. Brenna wailed. What are you going to do? Stay here, I commanded. Do not open the door for anyone, not even Mom and Dad, especially not Mom and Dad. I went into the guest room while Brenna was still sobbing in the living room. I needed to see the full scope of the infection. I went to the closet, the one I had locked. I opened it and took out the box my mother had brought on the first day. The welcome home box. It was filled with kitchen towels, a candle, and some old photo albums. But at the bottom, there was a manila folder. I had seen the edge of it when they arrived, but I hadn't looked inside. My mother had called it Important Papers for the House. I pulled it out. The label on the tab read, Ross Family Contingency. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and opened it. It was not house papers. It was a dossier. There was a spreadsheet estimating my monthly income based on my title and average market salary. There was a Zillow printout of the penthouse with the estimated equity highlighted in yellow. There was a typed document titled Reunification Strategy. I read the bullet points, my stomach turning to lead. Phase 1. Secure housing for Brenna in Hazel's unit. Temporary basis to establish presence. Phase 2. Transfer Ross Family Holdings debt to Hazel as guarantor. Leverage family obligation. Phase 3. Liquidation of Oak Street property. Once Hazel assumes carrying costs. Phase 4. Parents downsize. Potential move-in to Glasslight Tower guest suite if Brenna's situation stabilizes. It was a business plan, a hostile takeover of my life. They had calculated my net worth and decided it was enough to float the entire family's failures. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as an acquisition target. The Ross Family Holdings debt wasn't just Brenna's failure. It was a shell game they were all playing, shifting money around to keep up appearances. And I was the fresh capital they needed to prevent a collapse. I stared at the page. Phase 4. Parents move in. They intended to live here, with me. They wanted to take the sanctuary I had worked 15 years for and turn it into the Ross family compound. With me as the servant banker, I closed the folder. I could have screamed. I could have marched into the living room, thrown the folder at Brenna, and dragged her out by her hair. I could have called my parents and unleashed a lifetime of repressed rage. But that is what the old Hazel would have done. The emotional Hazel. The daughter. The daughter would lose. They would gaslight her. They would call her hysterical. They would say it was just ideas and that she was overreacting. I needed to be the strategist. I stood up. I walked to my home office. I scanned every single page of the folder into a secure cloud drive. Then I photocopied the documents. I took the originals and placed them back in the folder, exactly as I had found them. I put the folder back in the box in the guest room closet. I washed my face in the bathroom. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick. I practiced my smile in the mirror. It was sharp, brittle, but it held. I walked out to the living room. Brenna was still sitting on the couch. Looking terrified, I ordered pizza. I said brightly, "It will be here in 20 minutes." She looked at me, confused. "Pizza? But what about Westmere? What about the man?" I sat down in the armchair across from her, crossing my legs. "I am handling it." "Brenna, I lied. You were right. We are family. I need to think about the best way to solve this. But for tonight, let's just eat." Relief washed over her face. It was pathetic how easily she believed that I would fix it. She had been trained to believe I was the fixer. "Thank you, Hazel," she breathed. "Thank you. I knew you would understand." I smiled at her. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. I understood that my family was a sinking ship, and they had just thrown me a rope hoping to pull me down with them. But they didn't realize that I wasn't in the water anymore. I was the captain of my own vessel, and I was about to cut the line. The move I was planning would not be loud. It would not be emotional. It would be a legal eviction of their entire influence from my life. It would be irreversible. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Lena Park. "I have the evidence. Draft the papers. We go nuclear on Monday." The fluorescent lights of Lena Park's office were a stark, sterile contrast to the warm, ambient lighting of my penthouse, and I preferred them. Here, the rules were written in black ink on white paper, not whispered in passive-aggressive guilt trips. Lena slid a document across the mahogany desk toward me. It was thick, stapled in the corner, and titled Temporary Occupancy Agreement. "This is the nuclear option disguised as an olive branch," Lena said, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. "It establishes Brenna as a tenant." "Yes, but a tenant with extremely specific restrictions. We have set the rent at $1 per month." $1, I repeated, looking at the number written out in the text. $1.00. It makes the contract binding. Lena explained, "Consideration must be exchanged for a contract to be valid. If she lives there for free, she is a guest, and guests have vague rights that can morph into squatters' rights depending on how a judge feels that day. If she pays rent, she's a tenant subject to the terms of the lease, and if she violates the terms, she is in breach." I flipped through the pages. It was brutal in its clarity. Clause 4. No overnight guests without 48 hours prior. Written notice to the landlord. Clause 7. No duplication of keys or access fobs. Clause 12. Occupancy shall terminate irrevocably on February 14th, 2026. It felt cold. It felt like I was serving an eviction notice to my own sister before she had even refused to leave. But then I remembered the folder in the closet. Ross Family Contingency. I remembered the $70,000 loan application. I remembered the man in the lobby. "This protects you." "Hazel," Lena said. Seeing my hesitation, "It strips away the emotional ambiguity. If they sign this, they are acknowledging that her stay is temporary. If they refuse to sign it, they are admitting that they intend for her to stay forever." I took the pen. I signed my name on the landlord line. "I am not doing this to be cruel," I said, more to myself than to Lena. "Clarity is not cruelty." "Hazel," Lena replied, "ambiguity is the weapon abusers use. You are just turning on the lights." I presented the document that evening. I had ordered dinner again, safe, neutral territory, and waited until we were finished eating. Brenna was in a better mood, likely because she thought my silence over the last 24 hours meant I had capitulated to the family plan. I placed the agreement on the coffee table. "What is this?" Brenna asked, wiping tomato sauce from her lip. "It is an occupancy agreement," I said calmly, "since you are going to be staying for the full 2 weeks, and potentially a few days longer if you need time to find a place. I want to make sure we are both protected. It sets the ground rules." My mother picked it up. She put on her reading glasses, the ones on the beaded chain, and scanned the first page. Her smile dropped like a stone. "A lease?" she asked, her voice trembling. You are making your sister sign a lease? It is a formality. Mom, the rent is $1. $1? My father snatched the paper from her. He read it, his face turning a mottled shade of red. This is an insult. You are treating your sister like a stranger off the street. No overnight guests? Liability waivers? Hazel, this is family. We do not do paperwork for family. We should, I said, especially when money and property are involved. This just ensures that everyone knows the expectations. Brenna gets a safe place to stay for $1 a month. I get the assurance that my house rules are respected. Brenna stood up, her eyes filling with tears instantly. It was a reflex, a defense mechanism she had perfected by age 7. You do not trust me, she wailed. That is what this is. You think I'm going to wreck your precious penthouse? You care more about your floors than you do about my life. I care about my boundaries. Brenna, you are choosing strangers over blood, she shouted. You are choosing lawyers and pieces of paper over your own flesh and blood. How can you be so cold? Mom, tell her. My mother looked at me, her eyes wet and wide, performing the role of the wounded matriarch. I do not know who you are anymore. Hazel, she whispered, we raised you to be generous, to be the big sister. This is legal bullying. You are kicking her when she is down. I felt the old guilt rising, the conditioning that told me I was responsible for their happiness. But then I felt the weight of the Ross family contingency folder I had scanned. They were not asking for help. They were asking for submission. If you do not sign it, I said, keeping my voice flat and even, then you cannot stay. The guest pass expires in 10 days. Without this agreement, I will not renew it. My father threw the paper back onto the table. It slid across the glass surface. Fine, he spat. Sign the damn paper. Brenna, humor her. If she wants to play landlord, let her play landlord, but do not expect us to forget this. Hazel, you are drawing a line in the sand. I am not drawing a line. Dad, I said, I am building a wall. Brenna signed it, sobbing the entire time, making sure her tears stained the paper. I took the document, folded it, and locked it in my office before I went to sleep. I did not sleep well. I dreamed of walls closing in, and my father standing on the other side, holding a sledgehammer. The next day, I met Talia for lunch. I needed a reality check. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was the villain in a melodrama where everyone else was a saint. We met at a small bistro near my office. Talia ordered a glass of wine for lunch, something she rarely did. You look like hell, she said efficiently. I feel like hell. I made her sign a lease. For $1. My mother looked at me like I had murdered a puppy. Talia took a sip of wine. Good, she said. Good? I feel like a monster. Hazel, listen to me. Talia leaned forward, her expression fierce. You are looking at this wrong. You think Brenna is asking for shelter because she is in trouble. You think she just needs a bed, doesn't she? No, Talia shook her head. If she just needed a bed, she would stay at your parents' house. They have a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. It is free. It is safe. Why is she fighting so hard to stay in your penthouse? Because she wants to be in the city? I guessed. Because she wants your life, Talia said. She wants the status. Living in Glasslight Tower makes her feel successful. It makes her feel like she is you, without having to do the work you did. She is not asking for charity. Hazel, she is asking for a lifestyle transfer. She wants to wear your skin. I shivered. That is dark. Talia, it is true. Look at how she acts. Does she act grateful? Or does she act entitled? Does she clean up after herself? Or does she wait for the maid you pay for? She waits for the maid. I admitted. Exactly. She is playing house in your life. And your parents are encouraging it because if she becomes you, they do not have to worry about her anymore. You become the host. I thought about the reunification plan in the folder. Phase 4. Parents move in. You are right, I whispered. It is not just Brenna. It is all of them. They want the tower. Then you have to defend the tower. Talia said, and stop feeling guilty. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep them warm. I returned to the office feeling slightly more fortified. I had a strategy, I had a lease, I had a deadline. Then the second front opened. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a campaign launch for a coffee chain, when an email notification popped up. It was from the Human Resources Director at Kestrel Company. The subject line was simply, "Urgent matter, confidential." My stomach dropped. I clicked the email. "Dear Hazel, we have received a formal anonymous complaint regarding your conduct. The complaint alleges financial misconduct involving vendor contracts and abuse of power regarding internal resource allocation. Given the serious nature of these allegations, we are required to open an internal investigation. We need to meet immediately. Please come to my office." I stared at the screen. The words swam before my eyes. Financial misconduct, abuse of power. I had been at Kestrel Company for 7 years. I was impeccable. I checked every invoice 3 times. I never expensed a personal coffee. I walked to the HR office in a daze. The director, a woman named Sarah, whom I had known for years, looked uncomfortable. "Hazel, please sit down," she said. "Sarah, this is insane," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "You know me. Who is accusing me?" "I cannot reveal the source," she said. "It was submitted through our anonymous ethics portal, but the details are specific. It claims you have been steering contracts to a shell company you own and using company funds to cover personal debts." The phrase triggered a connection in my brain. Westmere Funding Group, the $70,000 loan. "I do not have personal debts," I said, "and I do not own a shell company. We have to investigate. Hazel, it is protocol. We will need access to your work emails and your financial disclosures." I walked back to my office, my mind racing. Who would do this? A rival at work? A disgruntled employee? And then I thought about the timing, the Ross family contingency folder, the pressure to provide for the family, the accusation of financial misconduct mirroring exactly what I had accused Brenna of with her business. I sat down at my computer. I was the IT liaison for my department. I had administrative privileges that allowed me to view the metadata of incoming tickets to the ethics portal if they were flagged for my department. Which this one technically was not. But the system had a flaw. I shouldn't do it. It was a violation of policy. But I was being framed. I logged into the back end of the project management system, which shared a server with the ethics portal. I couldn't see the content, but I could see the traffic logs. There was an entry at 2:15 that afternoon. Anonymous submission. I traced the IP address. It wasn't coming from inside the Kestrel network. It was external. I ran a geolocation trace on the IP. It resolved to a commercial hub in the downtown district, the Hive co-working space. My blood ran cold. Brenna had a membership at the Hive. She used it for Sun Petal Studio. She had mentioned it months ago, bragging about the creative energy there. She, or someone using her credentials, had filed the complaint. Why? To destabilize me, to make me vulnerable. If I lost my job, or even if I was just under investigation, I would be scared. I would be less likely to fight them on the house. I might even need their help, or maybe it was simpler. Pure spite. You threaten my housing. I threaten your career. I took a screenshot of the IP trace. I didn't send it to Sarah yet. I needed to be sure. I called the Hive. I put on my best concerned assistant voice. "Hi, this is the reception desk at Kestrel Company." I said, "We found a tablet in our lobby that belongs to a member of yours. I think it auto-connected to your Wi-Fi. The owner is Brenna Ross. Is she in today?" The receptionist at the Hive typed for a moment. "Yes, she checked in at 1 o'clock. The receptionist said, "She is still here. Do you want me to page her?" "No." I said, "I will just hold on to it until she comes by. Thank you." I hung up. Brenna was there. At the time the complaint was sent. She was trying to destroy me. Not just use me, but break me. I left work early. I couldn't focus. I felt like the walls were dissolving. My safe space at work was compromised. My safe space at home was occupied. As I walked into the lobby of Glasslight Tower, I saw Mrs. Higgins, the board president, standing by the mailboxes. She was a stern woman who monitored the building like a hawk. "Hazel," she said, stepping into my path, "we need to talk." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, forcing a smile. "Is everything okay?" "No, actually." She crossed her arms. "I had a lovely chat with your mother in the lobby this morning. She is very charming." My stomach twisted. "She told me all about how she and your father are moving in to help you," Mrs. Higgins said. "She said you have been having some mental health struggles, that you are overwhelmed." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. They were seeding the narrative. "Hazel is unstable. Hazel needs help." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. "My mother is mistaken. I am perfectly fine. And they are not moving in. That is not what the portal says." "Mrs. Higgins countered. "What?" "We received a residency modification request this morning, submitted from your account, adding Martha and Robert Ross as permanent residents with full key access." I felt the floor tilt. "I did not submit that." I said, "It came from your login." "Hazel, then my account has been compromised. I did not authorize it. Please, Mrs. Higgins, cancel that request immediately and flag my account. No changes without my in-person signature." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She was assessing me. Was I the unstable daughter the mother had described? Or was I the victim of a takeover? "I will cancel it," she said slowly. "But Hazel, we do not like drama in Glasslight Tower. If this continues, the board will have to discuss your status." "I understand." I said, "It ends today." I walked to the elevator. My hands were not shaking anymore. They were fists. Identity theft, defamation, cyberstalking. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a crime spree. I rode the elevator up to the 30th floor. The numbers ticked by slowly. 1, 5, 10. I thought about the little girl I used to be. The one who tried so hard to get straight as so my father would look at me the way he looked at Brenna. The one who saved her allowance to buy my mother birthday gifts, only to have her exchange them. That little girl was dead. She died the moment I found the Ross family contingency folder. 2025. I took out my phone. I opened the app for the security camera I had hidden in the living room, the one I hadn't told anyone about. It was a tiny lens disguised as a smoke detector sensor. I looked at the live feed. My parents were sitting on my sofa. My father had his feet on the coffee table, shoes on. My mother was holding a glass of my best vintage red wine, but they weren't alone. David, the afternoon concierge, was standing there. He looked uncomfortable. I watched on the tiny screen as my father gestured around the room. "We just need the spare fob." "David," my father was saying, "as you can see, we are practically living here. My daughter forgets things. She is very scatterbrained lately. The stress, you know." David shifted his weight. "I really need Ms. Ross's approval." "Sir, she is in a meeting," my mother chimed in. "She called us. She said, 'Mom, Dad, get the key from David. I locked myself out of the bedroom.' We are just trying to help her. They were trying to social engineer the concierge into giving them permanent access. Inside my own home. 30. The elevator doors opened. I walked down the hall. I didn't rush. I walked with the heavy, deliberate tread of an executioner. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The conversation stopped instantly. David jumped, looking relieved to see me. My parents froze, wineglass halfway to my mother's mouth. "Hazel," my father boomed. "Recovering first. You are home early." I didn't look at him. I looked at David. "David," I said, "why are there non-residents in my unit without me present?" David turned pale. "Ms. Ross, they said it was an emergency. They said you called them. They said you were unwell." I turned my gaze to my parents. It was a cold, dissecting look. "I am not unwell. David, I did not call them, and they are lying to you." My father stood up, his face darkening. "Now, hold on. Hazel, we were just... Please leave." "David," I interrupted, never taking my eyes off my father. And take the log of this interaction. If they ask you for a key again, you are to call the police. Is that understood? Yes. Ms. Ross. Absolutely. David fled the apartment, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother set the wine glass down. You embarrassed us, she hissed, in front of the staff. You broke into my home, I replied. We did not break in. Brenna let us in, my father shouted. I looked around. Where was Brenna? She was hiding in the guest room again? No. I walked to the hallway. The guest room door was open. Brenna was not there. Where is she? I asked. She went out. My mother said, she has a date. A date? With who? Some nice young man she met, my mother said, fluffing a pillow. She is moving on. Hazel. Just like you wanted. You should be happy. A date. Or a meeting. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the IP trace alert I had set up earlier. The device that sent the HR complaint had moved. It was pinging from a location 3 blocks away. The Golden Oar. A high-end steakhouse. A date. I looked at my parents. They were smug. They thought they had won a small victory by getting into the apartment. They didn't know I knew about the HR complaint. They didn't know I knew about the portal hack. They were just the distraction. Brenna was the operative. Get out, I said. Excuse me? My father stepped forward, using his physical size to intimidate me. It was an old trick. It didn't work anymore. Get out of my apartment, right now, or I call the police and report you for trespassing and identity fraud. Fraud? He laughed. You are hysterical. I know about the building portal. Dad, I know you tried to add yourselves to the lease this morning. That is digital fraud. I have the logs. His face changed. The confidence faltered. I also know about the HR complaint. I added softly. My mother gasped. It was a small, involuntary sound, but it confirmed everything. She knew. You know? She stammered. I know Brenna sent it. I know you are trying to get me fired so I will be too weak to fight you. But you miscalculated. I walked to the door and held it open. Go. My father glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You are making a mistake. Hazel, you are going to end up all alone in this glass box. And when you fall, and you will fall, do not come crying to us. I will not. I promised. They walked out. I slammed the door. I locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I was shaking again, but not from fear, from adrenaline. They had tried to take my home. They had tried to take my job. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there. Brenna was on a date. I took out my phone and dialed Lena Park. It went to voicemail. Lena, I said, it is Hazel. We are moving up the timeline. File the police report for the identity theft tomorrow morning and draft the eviction notice. Not for 2 weeks. For immediately. I want them gone. I hung up. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was the whistleblower now. And I was about to blow the whole house down. The door clicked shut, severing the connection between my sanctuary and the chaos my parents had brought into the hallway. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, like a war drum. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the wood grain, waiting for them to bang on the door, waiting for the screaming to start. But there was silence. They were gone, but the damage was lingering in the air like smoke. I turned and walked to the kitchen island. I poured the glass of wine my mother had abandoned down the sink. The red liquid swirled into the drain, looking too much like blood. I did not collapse. I did not cry. The time for tears was over. Now was the time for documentation. I took the elevator down to the lobby. David, the concierge, was standing behind the marble desk, looking pale. He was typing furiously, likely an incident report. When he saw me approach, he flinched. Ms. Ross, he stammered. I am so sorry. They were very convincing. They said you were... He trailed off, unable to repeat the lie. It is all right, David, I said, my voice steady and low. You were manipulated by professionals, but I need you to do something for me now. Anything. Ms. Ross, I need a printout of the access log for the last 2 hours. I need a written statement from you detailing exactly what they said to you to gain entry. Quote them directly, specifically the part where they claimed I was mentally unwell. David nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I can do that. And David? I leaned in, placing my hands flat on the cool marble. Update my unit protocol. No guests, no deliveries sent up without verbal confirmation, and under no circumstances are Robert or Martha Ross allowed past this desk. If they refuse to leave, you call the police immediately. Do not call me first. Call the police. Understood. He handed me the printout. I took it. It was warm from the printer. It was the first brick in the new wall I was building. The escalation came at 8 o'clock that evening. I was sitting in my study, reviewing the scanned documents from the Ross family contingency folder, when my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again, on the 4th ring. I answered. I needed to know the angle of attack. Hazel. His voice was deceptively calm. It was the voice he used when he was trying to sell a lemon of a used car to a widow. We are worried about you. I am fine. Dad, you are not fine, he said. You kicked your parents out of your home. You are paranoid. You are imagining conspiracies. Your mother is beside herself. We have been talking to some people. What people? I asked, typing the time of the call into my incident log. Professionals, he said. We think you might be having a breakdown. The stress of the new house, the job. It is too much for you. We are looking into options. Legal options. If you are not safe to live alone. Hazel, we have a duty to intervene. For your own good. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He was not talking about therapy. He was talking about a conservatorship. He was implying that if I did not fall in line, they would paint me as incompetent and take control of my life by force. You are threatening me. I said, I am loving you, he corrected, the word twisting in his mouth like a curse. We just want what is best, and what is best is for family to be together. Think about it. Do not make us take the hard road. He hung up. My hand was trembling as I set the phone down. I looked at the view of Crestfall Harbor, the lights reflecting off the black water. They were gaslighting me on an industrial scale. They were willing to burn my sanity to the ground to secure their retirement plan. I needed an anchor. I opened my laptop and searched for a name I had been given years ago by a colleague who went through a messy divorce. Dr. Rowan Eames, clinical psychologist. I did not need therapy to fix me. I needed a witness to verify that I was not broken. I sent an email through her emergency portal. Subject: Urgent consultation/capacity evaluation. Message: I am being threatened with a legal intervention regarding my mental competency by family members attempting to gain financial control of my assets. I need an immediate evaluation to establish a baseline of sanity and capacity. I am not seeking treatment. I am seeking a forensic record. It was cold. It was transactional. But it was the only way to survive. Doctor. Eames saw me at 7 the next morning. Her office was in a brownstone in the old district, lined with books and smelling of tea and old paper. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for small talk. She listened to me for 40 minutes. I told her everything. The penthouse, the debt, the Ross family contingency folder, the threats, the concierge breach. I did not cry. I presented the facts chronologically, like a legal brief. When I finished, she sat back in her leather chair and took off her glasses. You are remarkably composed. Hazel, she said. I have to be. I replied. If I get emotional, they win. They use my emotions as proof of my instability. She nodded, based on our conversation. You are oriented, logical, and displaying high executive function. You are under extreme duress, yes. But that is a situational response, not a pathological one. You are being hunted. Effectively. Can you put that in writing? I asked. I can write a summary of our session noting that you are fully competent to make medical, financial, and legal decisions. It will hold up in court if they try to file for emergency guardianship. Thank you. But Hazel, Doctor, Eames said, leaning forward. Documentation is a shield. It is not a sword. You need to remove the threat. Why are they so desperate? This level of aggression, it suggests they are running out of time. I thought about the man in the lobby. The clock is done ticking. I think they are afraid. I said, then you need to find out exactly what they are afraid of. I went back to the penthouse with the letter from Dr. Eames tucked safely in my bag. I felt lighter. I had a shield. Now I needed a sword. I went into the guest room. Brenna was not there. She had left early, presumably to go to the hive and file more anonymous complaints about me. I went back to the closet. I needed to see the Ross family contingency folder again. I had scanned it, but I felt like I had missed something in the fine print. I pulled the folder out. I sat on the floor and spread the papers out on the carpet. Reunification strategy, income projections. I turned to the back of the folder. There was a document I had skimmed over before because it looked like standard boilerplate. It was a loan agreement from 3 years ago. Borrower, Ross Family Holdings. Lender, private entity. Redacted. Amount, $200,000. I squinted at the text. Ross Family Holdings was a shell entity my father had set up years ago for tax purposes. Though I never saw any business activity, I read the terms. It was a high-interest bridge loan. And then I saw it. Clause 14, B, Future Guarantor. Provision. Upon the acquisition of substantial real estate assets by any lineal descendant of the primary borrower, said assets shall serve as secondary collateral for the outstanding balance, contingent upon the signature of the descendant. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was illegal. It was completely unenforceable without my signature. You cannot pledge someone else's future property as collateral. But they had listed me. They had taken out a loan 3 years ago, long before I bought the penthouse, and they had sold the lender on the promise that eventually I would be rich. And eventually they would get me to sign. That was why they were here. That was why they needed to move in. That was why they needed to control me. The lender was calling the loan, and since my parents didn't have the cash, they needed to deliver the future guarantor, me. They weren't just mooching. They were trying to traffic me into a debt trap to save themselves from a loan shark. I heard the front door open. Brenna. I shoved the papers back into the folder and stood up. Brenna walked in, looking exhausted. She was carrying a coffee cup from the shop down the street when she saw me standing in the hallway. She froze. Hazel. She said, I didn't think you were home. I walked toward her. I didn't stop until I was 2 feet away. Ross Family Holdings. I said. Brenna flinched as if I had slapped her. The coffee in her cup sloshed over the rim, burning her hand. But she didn't drop it. I do not know what you mean. She stammered. $200,000. I said, 3 years ago. Clause 14, B. Did you know? She looked at the floor. She looked at the wall. She looked everywhere but at me. Did you know? Brenna? She crumpled. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. She just slumped against the wall, sliding down until she was crouching on her heels. I knew about the plan. She whispered, What plan? Mom and Dad. They made some bad investments. Real estate. Crypto. They lost a lot. Hazel. They took the loan to cover it. They told the guy. They told him they had a silent partner. You? Me? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. I didn't even know. They said you were the stable one. Brenna sobbed. They said you always succeeded. They said it was only a matter of time before you bought a big house or got a huge bonus. They said you owed the family. I owed the family? Because they sacrificed for you, she shouted, looking up with sudden, twisted defiance. That is what they said. They paid for your college prep. They supported you when you were an intern. They said you made it because they launched you. So you owed them a dividend. I stared at her. I had paid my own tuition. I had worked 3 jobs in college. They had given me $500 for graduation and a suitcase. That is a lie, Brenna. And you know it. She put her head in her hands. It doesn't matter if it is a lie. Hazel, the lender believes it, and he wants his money. I looked at my sister. She was 29 years old, but she was still a child, trapped in their narrative. She was a victim. Yes, But she was also an accomplice. Get up, I said. She looked up, eyes wet. I have a proposition. We sat at the dining table. I had a notepad. Here is the reality. I said, you cannot stay here. Every day you stay here. You validate their lie that I am part of this scheme. You are the bait, Brenna, and I am removing the bait. She started to cry again. Where will I go? Todd won't take me back. Mom and Dad are broke. I wrote a number on the notepad. 3 months. I said, what? I will pay for 3 months of rent on an apartment for you. Not here. Not in the city center. In Pinecroft. Pinecroft? She wrinkled her nose. That is an hour away. It is suburban. It is safe, I said, and it is affordable. I will pay the deposit and 3 months of rent. I will also pay for 6 sessions with a financial counselor. A real one, not Dad. She stared at the paper. Why? She asked. After everything I did? The HR complaint? I knew about that, obviously. Because you are my sister, I said, and because I want you to have a chance to escape them. But this is the deal. Brenna, you take the apartment, you leave the penthouse today, and you sign a document stating that you have no financial ties to me or my property. She hesitated. She looked at the luxury finishes of my apartment. She looked at the view. I could see the greed warring with the fear. But Pinecroft, it is so far. She whined. That is the point. Okay, she said finally. I will take it. I just want out. I'm so tired. Hazel. I felt a momentary flicker of relief. It was a start. Pack your things, I said. I will call the broker I know in Pinecroft. We can get you keys by tonight. I was in the kitchen calling the broker when the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor. It was my mother. Alone. I felt a surge of irritation. I had told David not to let them up. I pressed the intercom button. David, I said, I told you no visitors. It is Mrs. Ross. David's voice came through, sounding strained. She has a police officer with her. Ms. Ross. She claims she needs to retrieve medical equipment she left in the unit. The officer insisted. Medical equipment? It was a lie, but a clever one. I walked to the door. I opened it. My mother stood there, looking small and frail next to a bored-looking patrol officer. I just need my nebulizer. Hazel, she said, her voice trembling. I left it in the guest room. You know I get asthma when I'm stressed. She didn't have asthma. She had audacity. Get it? I said, stepping aside. Officer, you can wait here. My mother bustled past me. She didn't go to the guest room. She went straight to Brenna, who was standing by the suitcases in the hallway. You are packing? My mother asked, her voice dropping the frailty instantly. Hazel is getting me an apartment, Brenna said, looking guilty. In Pinecroft, she is paying for 3 months. It is a good deal. Mom, I can get a job there. My mother's eyes narrowed. She turned to me. Pinecroft? That is in the middle of nowhere. It is a nice neighborhood, I said, and it is not here. My mother walked over to me. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingernails digging into my silk blouse. She pulled me close, so the officer in the hallway couldn't hear. You stupid girl, she hissed. You think this is about rent? You think this is about an apartment? I pulled my arm away. I know about the loan. Mom, I know about the guarantor clause. It is fraud. She didn't flinch. It is survival, she whispered harshly. And if you send her to Pinecroft, you are killing her. What are you talking about? Westmere isn't just a bank. Hazel, they are connected. Why do you think we wanted her here? In a building with cameras? With a concierge? With a security door? I stared at her. You are using my home as a bunker. I realized, if she leaves here, my mother whispered, her eyes wide with a terrifying intensity, she has nowhere to hide. They will find her in Pinecroft in a day. And when they find her, they will hurt her to get to us. And to get to you. I looked at Brenna. She was watching us, oblivious to the conversation. Then go to the police. I said, we can't. My mother's voice cracked. Your father, he signed things he shouldn't have. If we go to the police, he goes to prison. Is that what you want? You want your father in prison? The manipulation was a masterclass. Layer upon layer. Protect your sister. Protect your father. Sacrifice yourself. Get your nebulizer, I said coldly, and get out. My mother stared at me. She saw that the guilt lever was broken. She saw that I wasn't buying it. She grabbed a random box of tissues from the table, her medical equipment, and marched out. As she passed me, she said one last thing. You are locking the door on your own blood. When the wolves come, do not say I didn't warn you. She left. The officer followed. I locked the door. My hands were shaking again. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a fortress, and they had tried to occupy it because they were at war with people much scarier than I was. I turned to Brenna. Finish packing, I said. But Mom seemed upset. Brenna started. Finish packing. I went to the mail pile on the counter. I had ignored it in the chaos of the last few days. I flipped through the envelopes. Bill, flyer, bill, and then I froze. A thick, cream-colored envelope, no return address. But the stamp was from the city center. I turned it over. It was addressed to Hazel Ross, at my penthouse address. But inside the envelope, through the thin paper, I could feel a stiff card. I opened it. It wasn't a card. It was a letter on heavy bond paper. The letterhead was embossed in silver. Westmere Funding Group. I read the text. Dear Ms. Ross, we are delighted to hear of your recent property acquisition at Glasslight Tower. It has come to our attention that you are the primary guarantor for the outstanding obligations of Ross Family Holdings. Enclosed is a copy of the affirmation of debt. We will be conducting a site visit on Friday, January 30th, to appraise the collateral. Please ensure you are home. Sincerely, Mr. Silas Vane. I dropped the letter. Friday. That was tomorrow. It has come to our attention. How? How did it come to their attention? I looked at the envelope again. It had a barcode sticker on the bottom, a mail forwarding sticker. Someone had set up a forwarding order. Any mail for Ross Family Holdings, or Brenna Ross, that went to my parents' house or Brenna's old apartment was being forwarded here. But this letter was addressed to me. They had merged us, in the eyes of Westmere. Hazel Ross and Ross Family Holdings were the same entity. My parents hadn't just used me as a future guarantor. They had actively pointed the wolves at my door. I looked at the date, Friday. They were coming here, to my home, to appraise the collateral. That meant they intended to intimidate me into signing over the deed or paying the cash. I looked at Brenna. She was zipping up her suitcase. I am ready, she said. I looked at the letter. I looked at the city lights. I could run. I could go to a hotel. I could call the police. But if I ran, they would just keep coming. If I called the police, it would be a civil dispute. My word against a contract my father had fraudulently created. It would take years to untangle in court, and in the meantime, Westmere would destroy my credit, my career, and my peace. No, I needed to end this. I picked up the letter. I'm not taking you to Pinecroft tonight. I told Brenna. She looked relieved. Really? Can I stay? No, I said. You are leaving. But not yet. I walked to my desk. I picked up my phone. I dialed Lena Park. Lena, I said, cancel the eviction notice. Hazel? Lena asked, confused. Did you change your mind? No. I said, I have a better idea. I need you to come over tomorrow morning. Bring a notary. And bring a private security detail. Why? What is happening? My family invited some guests over for a meeting, I said, my voice hard as diamond, and I have decided to host them. I was going to let them in, all of them. My parents, Brenna, and Mr. Silas Vane. I was going to get them all in one room, and I was going to burn the entire Ross family lie to the ground, with witnesses. The residence lounge on the 45th floor of Glasslight Tower was a space designed for power. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, dark mahogany walls, and a silence so profound it felt like a vacuum. I had reserved the private conference room at the back. I arrived 30 minutes early. I sat at the head of the long, polished table. To my right sat Lena Park, my attorney, her laptop open and a stack of files arranged with geometric precision in front of her. To my left sat Mrs. Higgins, the board president of the building. She looked severe in a gray suit, her presence a silent testament that this was not a family squabble. It was a building matter. And at the far end of the table, looking small and terrified, sat Brenna. She had her suitcase with her. It was tucked under the table, hidden from view. She was vibrating with anxiety, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. "Do not say a word until I tell you to." I had instructed her earlier. Now, we waited. At 10 o'clock exactly, the heavy double doors opened. My parents walked in. They looked victorious. My father was wearing his best suit, the one he wore to weddings and funerals, and he carried a leather briefcase I had not seen in years. My mother wore a structured dress and a string of pearls, clutching a folder to her chest. They walked with the confident stride of people who believed they were coming to accept a surrender. They saw me. They saw Brenna. Then they saw Lena. And finally, they saw Mrs. Higgins. My father's step faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. He flashed a charming, broad smile at Mrs. Higgins. "Good morning," he boomed, his voice echoing in the large room. I did not realize we would have an audience. We thought this was a private family discussion. I stood up. I did not smile. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the two empty chairs opposite me. My father pulled out a chair for my mother, then sat down himself, placing his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. "Hazel," he said, his tone patronizingly patient, "I do not think we need lawyers involved. Your mother and I have spent the last 24 hours working on a solution for everyone. We have a plan that handles the debt, secures Brenna's future, and takes the pressure off you." He tapped his briefcase. "We have drawn up a family trust agreement." He continued, "We put the Penthouse into a shared asset protection trust. We all manage it. We use the equity to clear the Westmere issue, quietly, of course, and then we refinance. It protects you from being sued, and it keeps the family together." He looked at Lena, then at Mrs. Higgins. "You can all go," he said dismissively. "We can handle this from here." I looked at Lena. She didn't move. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. She crossed her arms. "No one is leaving, Dad," I said, "and we are not signing a trust." My father's smile tightened. "Now, Hazel, do not be difficult. You are clearly overwhelmed. We are just trying to help you steer the ship." I picked up the first file from my stack. "I am not overwhelmed," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I am informed." I slid the file across the table. It slid smoothly over the polished wood and stopped right in front of his hands. "What is this?" he asked, not touching it. "That is a log of unauthorized access to my digital accounts." I said, specifically, "The building portal where someone attempted to add Robert and Martha Ross as permanent residents without my consent, and the credit monitoring alert for a $70,000 loan application using my social security number and a 20-year-old address." My mother gasped, touching her pearls. "That was a mistake," she cried. "A computer glitch." I ignored her. I slid the second file. "This is a copy of the Human Resources complaint filed against me at Kestrel & Co., accusing me of embezzlement. It was sent from a device registered to the co-working space used by Sun Pedal Studio." I looked at Brenna. She flinched, staring at the table. "And this," I said, sliding the third and thickest file, "is a complete photocopy of the folder you brought into my home, the one labeled Ross Family Contingency." My father's face went gray. He stared at the folder. He recognized it. "You went through our private papers?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a growl. "That is a violation of privacy. You brought them into my house," I countered, "and they detail a conspiracy to defraud a lender by pledging assets you do not own. Clause 14B, the future guarantor provision." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "You took out a $200,000 loan 3 years ago, pledging my future success as collateral. You sold me to a loan shark before I even bought this property." My father slammed his hand on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. "We did what we had to do," he shouted, "to save the family. You have so much. Hazel, Look at this place. You sit here in your ivory tower while we drown. You owe us. We made you. We sacrificed everything so you could have this career. The least you can do is sign a piece of paper to keep your sister safe." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Westmere is coming today. Hazel, Silas Vane. Do you know who that is? He is not a banker. He is a cleaner. If he doesn't get his money or a signature on a deed today, he is going to tear this family apart. You have to sign. You have no choice." I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I didn't see a father. I saw a desperate, drowning man trying to climb on top of me to breathe. "I do have a choice," I said, "and I have already made it." I nodded to Lena. Lena opened a folder and produced a single, stamped document. She placed it in the center of the table. "This is a deed of transfer," Lena said, her voice crisp and professional. "Dated 3 days ago, Ms. Ross has transferred the title of this penthouse into an irrevocable asset protection trust. The beneficiary of the trust is a charitable foundation focused on financial literacy for women." My parents stared at the document. They didn't understand. "What?" my mother whispered. "It means I do not own the penthouse," I explained. "The trust owns it, and I am not the beneficiary. Even if I wanted to sign it over to Westmere, I couldn't. It is untouchable. And if I die—" I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "If I die, or if I am incapacitated, the trust dissolves, and the assets are liquidated and donated to charity. Nothing goes to the family, not 1 cent, not 1 brick." My father looked like he had been struck in the chest. You disinherited us?" he choked out. "I removed the incentive," I corrected. "You cannot use me as a guarantor because I have no assets you can access. You cannot threaten my safety to get the money, because my death yields you nothing. I have removed myself from the board." My mother began to cry. It was a high, thin sound. "How could you?" she wailed. "We are your parents." I turned to the final document in my stack. "And this," I said, "is a copy of the police report I filed this morning." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. "Report?" Brenna whispered, looking up for the first time. "Identity theft," I said. "Mail fraud, cyberstalking." I detailed the loan attempts, the portal hack, and the false HR complaint. I looked at my father. I did not name the suspects in the report. I said softly, "Not yet. I filed it against person or persons unknown, but the investigators have the IP addresses. They have the access logs. It will not take them long to connect the dots to you." My father's face turned purple. "You would send your own father to prison?" he hissed. "Over money? Over consent," I said. "Over respect." I sat back. "But I am willing to pause the investigation," I said, "on one condition." "What?" my father snapped. I turned to Brenna. "Tell them," I said. Brenna looked at me, then at our parents. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Tell them the truth about Sunpetal," I commanded. Brenna took a deep breath. She looked at our father. It wasn't just a lifestyle brand. She whispered. My father's eyes widened. He stood up. "Brenna, shut up," he warned. "Sit down." "Mrs. Higgins barked from the side of the table. Her voice was authoritative, the voice of a woman who ran a multi-million-dollar building. "Sit down. Mr. Ross, or I call security." My father sat, seething. "Go on." "Brenna," I said. "It wasn't my company," Brenna said, tears spilling over her cheeks. "It was yours. Dad, you set it up. You told me to sign the papers. You said you needed a clean name because your credit was shot from the crypto losses." My mother covered her mouth. "Brenna, don't," she moaned. "You told me it was just for tax flow," Brenna shouted, her voice breaking. "But it wasn't. You were moving money for those people, for Westmere. You were washing their cash through my inventory accounts, and when the inventory didn't sell, the money got stuck. That is why we owe them $150,000. It wasn't bad sales. It was missing laundry money." I felt a chill go through me. It was worse than I thought. My father wasn't just a debtor. He was a mule, and he had made his youngest daughter the face of the operation. "I didn't know," my mother sobbed. He told me it was an investment. He used us, Brenna said. Looking at our mother, he used both of us. He used my name for the company, and he used Hazel's name for the collateral. We were just human shields. My father sat in silence. He didn't deny it. He just stared at the table, his jaw working. He is not a victim. Hazel, Brenna said to me, her voice gaining strength. He is the architect. I looked at my father, the man who had criticized my grades, who had told me I was cold, who had demanded my loyalty. He was a criminal who had hidden behind his children. The meeting room was silent for a long time. Then I spoke. Here's the deal. I said. I pointed to the door. Brenna leaves today. Right now, she has a lease signed for an apartment in Pinecroft. I have paid for 3 months. She has an appointment with a forensic accountant and a lawyer. Not Lena. A criminal defense attorney. Tomorrow morning. I looked at my parents. You two leave. You are banned from this building. Mrs. Higgins has already issued the persona non grata order. If you step foot on this property again, you will be arrested for trespassing. And the debt? My father asked, his voice hoarse. Westmere? That is your problem. I said, you signed the agreement. You moved the money. You deal with Silas Vane. If he comes to me, I will show him the trust documents proving I have nothing to give him. And I will show him the police report proving that I am already talking to the authorities. He won't touch me. He hates heat, and I am a bonfire. My father laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. You are destroying us, he said. You are condemning us. You condemned yourself when you signed my name. I said, I looked at Brenna. You have a choice. Brenna, you can get in the car with them. Go back to their house. Keep playing the game. Or you can take your suitcase, get in the elevator, and go to Pinecroft. You cut contact. You start over. You tell the truth to the lawyer. Brenna looked at our parents. My mother was weeping. A broken, defeated sound. My father was glaring at me with eyes of stone. Come on. Brenna, my father said, standing up. Let's go. Hazel has made her choice. She wants to be alone. Let her be alone. We are family. We stick together. He held out his hand to her. It was the same hand that had offered her candy when she was a child. The same hand that had guided her signature on the fraud documents. Brenna looked at the hand. Then she looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't offer her a hand. I offered her an exit. I am not coming. Brenna said. My father froze. What? I am not coming with you, she said, standing up. Her legs were shaky. But she stood. I am going to Pinecroft. You cannot survive without us. My father sneered. You are weak. Brenna, you always have been. I am weak because you broke me so you could control me, she said. She reached under the table and pulled out her suitcase. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Mom. She walked away from the table. She walked toward the door. My mother lunged forward, grabbing Brenna's arm. Brenna, please. He will kill us. If you leave, he will blame us for the money. We need you to testify that it was your business. Brenna pulled her arm away. It wasn't my business. Mom, it never was. She walked out the door. My father looked at me. The hatred in his eyes was absolute. You think you won, he said, but you lost a family today. I stood up. I felt tall. I felt solid. Love without consent is not love. Dad, I said quietly, it is ownership, and I am not your property. I nodded to Mrs. Higgins, please escort them out. Mrs. Higgins tapped her phone. 2 security guards stepped into the room from the hallway. Mr. and Mrs. Ross, Mrs. Higgins said, this way. My parents were marched out. My mother was sobbing. My father held his head high, his arrogance shielding him to the very end. When the doors closed, the silence returned to the room. It was just me and Lena. Lena closed her laptop. You did it, she said softly. I walked to the window. I looked down. 30 stories below. I saw a small figure walking out of the main entrance. She was pulling a suitcase. She walked to the curb, and a cab pulled up. She got in. The cab merged into traffic and disappeared. I didn't know if she would make it. Pinecroft was just a place. It wasn't a cure. She had debts. She had trauma. She had a long road of legal battles ahead of her if she wanted to stay out of jail for my father's crimes. But she had left. She had chosen the unknown over the familiar poison, and I was here. In my glass tower, I was alone. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the building app. Visitor alert. Silas Vane. I looked at the screen. He was in the lobby. I pressed the intercom button. "David?" I said. "Yes." "Ms. Ross?" "Send Mr. Vane up." I said. "Ms. Ross? Are you sure?" "The police." "Send him up." "David, I have some paperwork to show him." I ended the call. I wasn't afraid. My parents were gone. The liability was severed. I was the owner of my life, the guarantor of my own fate. The elevator chimed. I turned to face the doors. The story wasn't over. But for the first time, the pen was in my hand. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Tried to Move My Sister into My New Luxury Penthouse until they saw what I'd done. Writing Hazel's journey from the responsible spare to the architect of her own freedom was an intense ride. And I hope you felt every moment of the tension. I would love to know where you are listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. We post new, realistic dramas every week, and your support helps us keep writing. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Did Hazel do the right thing by sending Brenna to Pinecroft? Or should she have done more? Do you think the parents got what they deserved? Let me know your theories in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, protect your peace.